It's been another great winter at Oaklawn, just strength to strength, and Frank Mirahmadi adds so much to the entire atmosphere. And here we are, Frank. Hard to believe the season is days from wrapping up. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Stephen. You know, it's that time of the season where it's been a long one due to the weather and such, and, you know, we get to this last 4 days, and it's the final push, and it's such an incredibly exciting push. But then there's the inevitability that comes Sunday morning, this season will have been behind us. And it's always like almost a sad deal because there are a lot of people that come from various parts of the country together. We spend a good solid 3.5, 4 months, and then everyone goes their separate ways. So it's a little bittersweet, but it's been a great season. You're absolutely right.
Well, and it's going to finish with a real flourish, and you only have to look back at that wild fantasy. I had Proctor on the show on Monday, and I tweeted after the race, I guess Proctor's living right because Include Betty might have come down, but after a long inquiry, she stays up, and we turn our attention to tomorrow, the carousel, the Count Fleet on Thursday, and now here is the 3-year-old filly champion back after that surprising upset coming into this, and she gets upset again, Frank. Then the mutterings really will begin.
There's no question. Let's face it, she had a dream trip last time out. She was right there, and she just couldn't go by a gold medal dancer. Now, gold medal dancer is very talented, and she turned her away fair and square. But you're right. This is the time for untappable, with the old sweep comment, needed last, beware. I mean, she should take care of business in round 2 of these two fillies hooking up.
And then looking ahead as well to Saturday, and here's American Pharoah and his opportunity to head to the Derby. Potentially, obviously, a perfect 2 for 2 as a 3-year-old, and whatever was ailing him that kept him out of the Breeders' Cup seems well behind him. And if you listen to Bob Baffert, we may all be in for something special from American Pharoah on Saturday.
I sure hope they let him, let it out a notch, so to speak, because last time it was just an exhibition, and it'll be interesting to see what develops. It just looks on paper. You talk about as good as it can look for a horse. He's so brilliant, but we just don't know. He hasn't. I almost think he needs another fierce test, unless he's that brilliant. I mean, we've had comparisons from very well-respected individuals to some of the great horses of all time, and we all know that, the commentary from AM drills doesn't always equate to what you see in the afternoon, particularly on the first Saturday in May. I'd like to see him, get pushed a little bit in this race for at least a period of time, because last time that race was pretty much over when they went to the backstretch.
Give us a glance, too, the rest of what we are going to see drawn tomorrow for Saturday.
Well, we also, of course, have the Oaklawn Handicap, which is going to be a great race for the older horses. And that card in general on closing day, we have so many races. We'll have full fields. We've got a Baffert maiden going to take on winners in one of our stakes races coming in from California for Frank Fletcher, who, of course, is a very prominent car dealer out here. I like the races leading up to Saturday. I think the Carousel is a good race. I absolutely love a horse in the Bachelor on Friday, a horse named Holy Boss. As much as I loved Subtle Indian last time, and Subtle Indian did really put Holy Boss to sleep when they met in round 1. We saw a whole new Holy Boss in his victory the other day, and I'm looking forward to that rematch. That's going to be a great race. It's just, great race after great race. The Count Fleet, and there are some price horses. I know, Steve, you're very good at picking out some price horses, and there are some horses that you're going to be able to get some prices on over the next few days that I think have a chance to pull off some upsets.
Well, we're looking forward to it. I've said repeatedly that through the course of the winter, I ended up betting Oaklawn more this winter than I bet Gulfstream, and that's a first. I had a really fun time, and I thought that the racing was so consistent and formful, and it's funny, you wouldn't think that not having a grass course, the lack of quote unquote diversity from that standpoint, it would hurt and would make the racing less appealing, but I didn't find that to be the case.
No, that's because we had sloppy, good, and muddy for you throughout the season just to mix things up. We had floor surfing and wet fast. Make it fun.
There you go. A little bit of everything. Well, certainly a great run-up. We've only got Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday's cards to peruse, but very strong each and every day. The Carousel tomorrow, and then the Count Fleet, the Grade 3 on Thursday before the Grade 1. We got, of course, Untappable headlining and Gold Medal Dancer. Don't want to discount Donnie Vaughn with the mare, because she clearly has been just a different horse this year. Quantum leap forward. And that that should make for another good confrontation, and there's 5 others. Let's talk about some of the psychology, Frank, and one of the things that I thought you could address, and I didn't get a chance to talk about it with Jonathan, is the concept of prime bet and action bets, and exerting control and making a plan and approach, and then sticking with it, and not being coerced into betting wantonly, even sometimes when you're playing with house money.
It's very important, Steve, because I personally went through stages of my life where Bob Baffert actually named a horse after me, screen to screen. And it was because he knew that no matter where the race was going, whatever was coming up next with 1 minute to post was where my attention was going to be. And I can tell you that will, in almost every single case, result in taking a bath that does not involve my childhood friend, Mr. Bubble. So the first thing I would ever say about betting in general on horses is, we hear it so often. People say I'm a great handicapper, but I'm a bad money manager or a bad bettor. And, to me, when I grew up, it was you'd go to the track, Santa Anita, Hollywood, or occasionally Del Mar. I was in Los Angeles, and there were 9 races. And for the most part, it was win, play, show, and you'd have a daily double and 3 exacta races. And now I think what's happened is the game has changed so much with these multi-race wagers, and there's so much value in these pick 3s and pick 4s. But what happens is, if you go to the races, people start yelling, yes, I had that. And that's because they had the 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 10, and 11, and they ended up having that horse. And so I think that everything has really changed from just wanting to pick a few winners to now looking for the big score. And what can happen in doing that is you can lose focus. And I really in my heart believe that of all forms of wagering, there is no question in my mind that this horse racing presents the greatest opportunity for success. And people may argue that because they'll talk about takeout, and takeout is very difficult to overcome. However, you're not forced to bet on every race at every track. And if you can have the discipline to really focus in on things that make sense, where you can actually get an edge, there are times in which there are tremendous value opportunities, and I know you discuss that on a frequent basis.
Absolutely. And the ability to manage oneself and to have the self-confidence to not get shaken. And that's an element that is such a variable. And no matter how hard somebody works. Jonathan Kinchin talked tonight about when things go awry for him, he doubles down in terms of his work effort and it just works at it harder and watches more replays and digs deeper and adds another handicapping product to the arsenal and looks at it a fresher way and just keeps digging. That isn't necessarily the answer for everybody, but the across-the-board element of having confidence in oneself and not letting a set of circumstances that don't go the way you want overwhelm shake your confidence. That, to me, is central to any long-term success in this game.
There's no question. And the thing about it is, one of my favorite video games, and I really have never been much of a video game man, has always been Miss Pac-Man. And Dave Weaver and I laugh about that element where they have the chase, where Miss Pac-Man is going across the screen. When you chase, you're pretty much finished. I can promise you that, and it's not just the experiences I've had, the people that I've seen that chase, and I think what happens a lot of the times, there are some people, Steve, that just don't like to bet on the favorite, okay, and they take pride in going elsewhere. There are times when the favorite absolutely lays over a field and that's the only move to make and that you may get value. But if you really watch the tote board late in a wagering cycle, you'll notice that typically speaking, a horse that's 9-5 or 8-5 starts dropping to 7-5, 6-5, even money, etc. And what that is, much of it is the fact that A, people usually go with the most logical type of winner, and then B, there are the chase bets. And, you're just looking up at a screen and you're thinking, you know what, this horse looks logical. I'm going to get out for that bad pick I just had at the other track, and I'm going to go here. And you'll watch. You'd be amazed if you watch the last race of the day, whether it's New York, California, Oaklawn. Watch what happens to the favorite in the last minute of wagering. It's unbelievable how the odds consistently drop. And that's the time when you've got to try to find some sort of alternative and not fall into that trap. And it's a lot easier said than done, because when you're in the heat of battle, and believe me, I was no good example of this at all. I mean, there's some bets I've made in my time that were just so bad from a standpoint of value that, you almost get what you deserve sometimes when your horse is up the track.
I think Caton was like a Miss Pac-Man champion or something. I remember something from her biography years ago. So I think we need to set up a showdown, Frank. You versus Caton Bradar and Miss Pac-Man, and we'll sell pay-per-view for it. How's that sound?
I can get through the first 6 screens, but once you get to that second level where the ghosts turn white immediately, I'm in big trouble. After the first 2 sets of screens, that third one, if you're not an absolute expert and haven't memorized it all, which I never did, you're in big trouble. And by the way,
I'm going to use that as a new racetrack term. My ghost just turned white. That's what happens when I can't pick a winner anymore. I like that line.
I used an expression once in a race call, and I said so-and-so is moving by these horses like Pac-Man eating dots. I always loved Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man. But I'm glad you brought up Caton, because that's another element that I really wanted to discuss. In this game, if in my opinion, you really have to utilize all of the tools that are out there. And Caton's a perfect example of that, because she does a phenomenal job, as you're seeing now on TVG and as you have on HRTV for years, in the paddock and watching horses. Here you get a person who not only has a great eye, but also gets on horses. So obviously she knows what she's looking at. She also has access to connections, and she can see things over and over again, and she'll see characteristics of the horse that will help her make that, quote-unquote, the paddock pick, or a horse to maybe look against because they're not acting the way in which you've seen them before good performances previously. Now, if you pay attention to that, her horses aren't always going to win. They're not always going to run well. But for the most part, what you're able to find from those types of analysts is something to give you a little bit of an edge, because what happens is I have found that of the things, when I watch, obviously I'm watching the horses in the post-parade, and what I have found is that whether or not I'm on TVG discussing it or on Twitter discussing it, I find that there are times when they're going to the gate and you can just see a horse that either is on their toes and really ready to give the best effort they have, or a horse that you're probably going to look against because they're getting a little bit wet. And that's the later stage of it's not right in the paddock. It's when they're getting toward the gate. All of a sudden they start getting a little nervous or they start acting up. For the most part, you're better off just avoiding that. It's easier said than done. But there was a horse, a maiden here last week or so called the Strip in the last race of the day. And the horse had run a good race the time before and now was back in and was even money, which was too low of a price. The Strip should have probably been about 8 or 9 to 5. Horse went into the gate, and I could hear up in the booth, this horse hit her head or his head, I can't remember what gender, but so hard that I heard it up in my booth. I'm like, oh, boy. And they backed the horse out of there, and I actually said, which it was just because I wasn't thinking to, watch every word I say, the Strip is backed out, much to the relief of his backers. Because at that point, you wanted to make sure this horse at least has a chance to get looked over and make sure that the horse can kind of get the cobwebs out after that deal. And as it turned out, the horse was fine, cleared, but didn't run his race. Well, here's the deal. The fact is, the horse was perfectly sound, but he might have had a little headache after that thing. That thing, you know what I mean? These are animals, and it was not his day. You can't use that kind of energy at the gate. and get away with it for the most part. When that kind of stuff happens, and you've got to pay attention, and then next time when that horse runs, maybe you give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Another example I wanted to talk about is someone like Andy Serling. I follow him on Twitter, and it's not just because I want to see his face 17 times at the end of each night when he's analyzing the entire card at New York. But you know what? Here's a guy who's spending time in New York every day, watching every race, and a guy that probably is looking to find value in his selections. So when he concedes, so to speak, to the favorite being the right horse, or just looking like a cinch, or that's a bad expression, but a standout, I should say, that's a horse that you might consider singling in some of the multi-race wagers. And I think you have to trust the experts that are out there, and it's like the old expression, handicap the handicapper. Certain people are going to have strengths in certain areas.
Well,
I think that's a really good point.
Absolutely, Frank. And there is so much out there at the player's disposal, given the era and given the various mediums and the way the information is delivered into the player's hands, things on YouTube and on the various websites. You mentioned Andy and the great work, for instance, on Trips and Traps, which not only gives you horses to bet and bet against based on trips, but it also teaches you how to watch races. I mean, there's so much. It's the best era ever to be a horse player, despite what certain people want to try to convince you of. And it's certainly a great time to be a race caller like you. The 2 years at Oaklawn have been tremendous, and believe me, they're already preparing for your arrival at Oceanport. Never was a guy more perfect for a place than you in Oceanport, New Jersey.
Thank you so much. And I'll tell you this, speaking of impulse control, I'm going to have to back off some of those slices of pizza on the East Coast because, let's face it, as Baffert likes to kid me, he tells me I need to back off that feed tub, and he is absolutely, positively not kidding. I will give you a horse that I put it on Twitter for those who follow me, but there's a horse named Pressing Luck that just ran for Steve Hobby the other day. If that horse doesn't break his maiden at Churchill Downs next time, I will be absolutely astonished. That is a good-looking horse. So for those of you following along, I would say that would be a single, and you might see that horse right around Kentucky Derby week. And, it's fun. I would say the best form of handicapping, folks, watch replays and trainer angles. My good friend Larry Letterman calls it the look. There are certain things. When Steve Asmussen claims a horse and you see it next time, owner-trainer Steve Asmussen, give it a little bit of an extra look. When we're at the last week of Oaklawn and he's 3 behind Chris Hartman, what do you think's about to happen in the next 4 days? The same thing that's happened each of my 4 seasons here. Steve's going to come like a freight train this week. He'll drop horses. He'll do whatever it takes, and he'll win some races.
Well, we're a winner when we get to check in with Frank Mirahmadi on every topic, the psychology of the horse player and the Racing Festival of the South, the season coming to a close at Oaklawn. Here over the next 4 days, the racing will be spectacular, as will the calls. Frank, thanks so much.
Thank you, and I'll close it out with one very simple and to-the-point message. Trust me on this, ladies and gentlemen. Always wager responsibly.